Welcome to the Mental Health Minute podcast. My name is Kris Salyards, and I'm the Executive Director for the Bridge Youth and Family Services. We provide mental health and family stabilization services to youth and families in our community. Through our podcast, we will talk to partners and experts, learn from Bridge staff, and talk with individuals who've received support through our services and who've become stronger as a result. Normalizing the conversation around mental health creates healthier individuals, families, and communities. Looking forward to sharing with you. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Health Minute. I'm Kris Salyards, the Executive Director of the Bridge Youth and Family Services. And today I am joined by my friend, Quinette Hobson-Robb. Two last names. It's a mouthful. So this episode is called Community at the Core, How Township Mental Health Boards Sustain Wellness. And we know that today mental health is on everybody's mind, right? And we know that rates of anxiety, depression, trauma, and disconnecting are all rising, while safety nets like Medicaid are currently being threatened, which makes all of us extremely nervous for all of the people we work with. In the middle of it all, the Township mental health boards are really silent heroes. If you don't know what a mental health board does, we're going to talk about that today. These boards keep our communities grounded, connected, and coordinated, right? I want to talk with Quinette today, who is the Executive Director of the Schaumburg Mental Health Board. We are participants with the Mental Health Board, so I thought it would be really great for you to come on and just tell us a little bit about what we do in the Mental Health Board. So before I move forward, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. I am mom first. I got my social work degree, kind of swore off macro social work, always thought I'd be in direct service, dabbled in that. And then I found a mental health board, and I was so taken aback by how much they do. So I was really drawn into that area. So spent time at the McHenry County Mental Health Board doing compliance and kind of overseeing grants, and then ended up shifting into the executive director role at the Schaumburg Township Mental Health Board, which is a newer mental health board, so it has been a ride. It's been a lot of fun. It's been challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding work.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for what you do there, for sure.
You.
So for our listeners who don't know or have never heard of a mental health board, can you just tell us what role it plays in the community?
Well, that's what a mental health board, I think there's a lot of people who probably never heard of a mental health board. So first I want to highlight, you may hear her referred to as a mental health board, a community mental health board, or even a 708 board. And that just comes from it being brought about by Illinois House Bill 708. So you might hear the 708 board reference. Really, they are a nonpartisan, special purpose subunit of government that are assessing community needs. They are then developing and funding services for mental health, substance use disorders, and developmental disabilities. So it's a lot of really just figuring out what the community needs and then jumping in and trying to solve that problem. And part of that is just building partnerships with local providers who are already doing this and need that help to continue doing the work they're doing. They're created by a voter approval of a referendum, and that comes from it being an additional tax levy. Then they are formed under a township or another taxing body. It could be some are county level, some are at a municipality, so it's really just having that other taxing body that will then form that under them. That's kind of the drawn out version that people kind of glaze over. The short version is mental health board role is to understand the community need and then really be purposeful and make meaningful actions to improve the community, to help meet those needs.
Okay.
Because, I mean, that's what a well-resourced community ends up being a healthy community in the long run.
And I love that because I think community is where it's at. You know, one of the things I feel like, especially post-COVID, is we've lost this sense of community. We've lost the sense of checking
Yes.
on your neighbor. We've lost a sense of, even if we don't agree on things, coming to the table around a common purpose.
Yes.
So I think that that's what I appreciate about the Mental Health Board is that not all communities are created equal. And so each community can carve out what it finds as its priorities.
Yes, we have a saying that if you've seen one mental health board, you've seen one mental health board because they run the gamut. They can be so different because it's really a response to the community they're based in. And we know not every community is the same. So they all can be very different.
Right. So what kind of services or programs does the Schaumburg Mental Health Board help fund?
Really, it's those three service areas. We focus on mental health, substance use disorders, and then intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that can be prevention, that can be treatment. We have day programming for those with disabilities. We have direct services under mental health. We have some that are just doing community education in mental health or in developmental disabilities. So it's really kind of the range between those three service areas.
And I think the interesting thing, I was talking to the Hanover Mental Health Board executive director, and she was saying they've been in existence since 1976. So they've been doing this for a while. And I think what's really interesting is that the providers become members of these various community mental health boards because there's so much overlap in our communities. The Bridge serves 6 townships, right? So we are providing a myriad of services. But the cool thing is, as you start to really get to meet your partner agencies and talk about what each other is doing, which helps with the reduction and duplication of services and also the awareness of where the gaps might lie. Do you think that that's something that you at the mental health board level, do you talk about that?
Yes, that is one of our big goals is to create a network of providers that also you get them in the same room. They start learning the names of other providers in other agencies. They start learning what these other agencies are doing. And I think anybody in direct service has had someone come through their door that it's like, wow, I really want to help, but this really isn't what we specialize in. There's other needs here that we really can't meet. Then that is where you start smoothing that referral process, that you start creating space for providers to build those relationships that then just smooth the process for the individuals that need services.
Mm-hmm. So how would you define the mental health board's purpose versus like your human needs committee's purpose for someone who lives in the township, right? So how do you identify those distinct differences?
That's why our township used to have these committees, and then when the mental health board was formed, some of them kind of dissolved. So some of our board members were on these existing committees, but I think the big difference is that needs assessment piece. Under the Illinois Community Mental Health Act, which is our governing kind of document, that is one of the things that a mental health board is supposed to be doing, is assessing the need of the community. I think that there's an additional level of commitment that comes from a mental health board that we aren't seeing on committees, that just further organization. There's full business meetings. A lot of committees are awarding a pot of money that might be township dollars that are going into just different needs, but a mental health board is then overseeing that pot of money. And they end up fiscally responsible for those taxpayer dollars. So I think that is where that ends up being different, is just the level of commitment needed to really honor what we are expected to do and then responsibly do it.
Okay, great. So we're seeing across the board, right? Rising rates of violence and isolation and fear, and often less access to mental health care. How do you see the role of a mental health board filling that need?
Well, first, I mean, I think, yeah, we are definitely in uncertain times, and that's all on the heels of a pandemic that I think really highlighted some of this stuff. And I think I would be remiss to not highlight a nationwide shortage of providers. That's what, according to the Behavioral Health and Economics Network, nationwide, we only have enough providers to meet roughly 26% of the need right now.
Wow.
In Illinois, that number is we have around 13.8 providers for every 10,000 residents.
Wow.
Nationally, that is 21.4% providers. So we are well behind the national average. That if you really dissect that, you see that that would give each of those providers a caseload of roughly 714 individuals.
Jeez.
When you do the math on that, if each of those providers were to work interacting directly with someone 35 hours a week, every week of the year, each of those people would get to see a provider for 2 hours a year.
Not enough.
Yeah. Yes.
Not
and that
enough.
is, then those providers are also, they don't get a sick day. They're not taking a vacation day. They're not taking a vacation. That is if they worked essentially nonstop for a year.
Well, and I think, of course, at the Bridge, we have a bench of clinicians, and we know that the needs that are coming through the door are greater. And, we push our clinicians into what is a reasonable direct service rate.
Right.
But especially when you work with kids, right? The level of intervention, it's not talk therapy. They have to really prepare. They have to play. They have to get down on the floor. And there's a lot of trauma work that has to happen. And so there's this new level of burnout because what we're seeing is a lot heavier than maybe what we saw 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Lots of suicidal ideation. And when you talk about suicidal ideation with 12-year-olds, it's very, very challenging to just churn and burn with your direct service hours. So I think that the punchline here is we need more clinicians. There's enough to go around. There's enough work to go around.
Yes, and I think that's a problem that the mental health board can't solve because we also have these other barriers to access. We have language and cultural barriers. Big one is insurance and cost. We have lack of awareness of what's available or how to access it. So and transportation is another one we often hear in this area that those are some of those barriers that we are then able to kind of look at and try to tackle. That these grant dollars can then address that cost barrier, that our residents can then go get services for free.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at transportation. We can, look at language and try to get interpreters and translation services into these agencies. So those are some of the barriers that mental health boards are able to then kind of tackle because we have a nationwide shortage, and that's going to be really too much. And I think it's a long-term issue, and really the projections don't look good at this point. It's going to get worse, I think, before it gets better. So that's unfortunate, but it's really just tackling some of those other barriers that on the human level, how do we start creating better access?
Yeah, right. Sort of emptying the ocean with a teaspoon.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What do you think is the most pressing priority? If you were to look at all of the things that you've seen come through the Mental Health Board in Schaumburg this year, what are some of your burning priorities that you guys have like, oh my gosh, we have to do something about X?
My big thing is access. Access. That's what, if someone doesn't know how to access it, then it's not doing any good. We can have the best resource in the world, that if people don't know about it, people don't know how to get there, people don't know where it is, then it's not doing any good. We're always seeing that people say, we have the need, but we don't know where to even begin. And part of that ties into the insurance and costs, that maybe that is the limiting factor. That, okay, I might know of this provider, but I don't have the insurance to go there. I won't be able to afford to self-pay to go there. So it's really looking at that big picture and trying to address those, that how do we even just get the community aware of the number of resources here and how they access them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's challenging all of us, especially us in the mental health field. How do we think differently about how we've historically provided services? It's no longer the cushy white couch that you can lie back on, right? It's how do we find spaces to melt into, to provide access? And that's one of the Bridge's priorities, has always been access, whether it's transportation, language, finding new and unique spaces to squeeze into, right? Sometimes meeting in clients' homes is challenging because you don't really know what you're walking into. Right. You don't know if there's a secure, quiet space. Mm-hmm. But is there this new idea where we go to laundromats, where we go to libraries, where we start to provide services in the communities where our people live and work? Especially now with, I would be remiss not to mention ICE raids, where you have a whole group of people who are now terrified to leave their homes. So how do you provide them with the services when you know these are just a series of future traumas that they're already predicting? So how do you help them, right? Not only address the needs that brought them to you in the first place, but to the future worries, stressors, anxiety that they're facing, whether it's because of actions taken against loved ones, against your workplace. It's a lot right now, right?
Yes.
And so to go back to your point of, I think access is where it's at, and we need creativity and agility.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money. I think that we need more of getting resources to the folks instead of expecting them to always come to the resource. It's just, if a tornado blows through a town, we aren't expecting all these members to get to 3 towns over to find a bottle of water, to reconnect with their loved ones. No, the response goes into that community. Mm-hmm. That's where the cleanup needs to happen. That is where the support's needed. So I think it's more of, we have to shift our focus as providers. That, like you said, I think that there's still a lot of going to do it in the safety of our office, when we have to start looking at the safety of the people we're working with. Mm-hmm. and going to where they're at. Yeah,
for sure. It's a tall order. It's a tall order when you have a shortage of providers. It's a tall order when you're looking at a slice in, insurance, Medicaid. The Bridge has historically been private pay, and when you're 100% private pay, right, you can't really afford a clinical staff to respond to the needs of the community. Right. You just can't afford to pay them what they should be paid.
Right.
So, you may be getting more inexperienced people. Mm-hmm. You may be getting people who are lacking in good supervision. Name the issues, right? So when we implemented Medicaid a couple of years ago, it was a game changer for us because now we could afford good clinicians. And my philosophy at the Bridge has always been, I want you to walk in here and feel like you're at any counseling agency. It shouldn't feel like low-income agency, right? You want to provide the same level of service that everybody else has access to.
Yes, ma'am.
So now you've made, you make that shift. And I will say we also pay about $100,000. We provide about $100,000 in free services a year, even with insured clients. So if they're on scholarship, if they're on sliding scale, we're still providing a pretty sizable chunk of free services. So when we think about that, right, now we're saying, well, now I want you to take this model and I want you to go to a library and check out a study room, because that's where Johnny is after school.
Yeah.
And we're asking more and more of a shrinking industry,
Yes.
right? And also, and now I'm on a rabbit hole, so forgive me, I'll come back to a point. But then you have like AI mental health services, which is very terrifying.
Yes.
Because there is no ethical code for an AI bot, right? And so I think Illinois just passed legislation that humans have to be providing these services, that they're not, there is no mandate or eligibility for for AI to be provided. Thank goodness.
Right.
I mean, for 900 reasons, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I fell into a hole there, so we can just cut that out of the podcast. But yeah, I think it's fascinating to me the wave we're riding right now.
Yeah.
Because as we work together, we see the chasm.
Yeah.
And no bridge to build it.
Yes. And I think that there are not enough people that feel that draw to build the bridge, but even they don't have enough resources. And I think that we do keep seeing that need get greater and greater, the resources fewer and fewer. And we do just continue to have an overburdened system that, it just results in large numbers of burnout. And then we lose more of our workforce.
Mm-hmm. Well, to move this into a slightly more positive direction, if you were to give me some words that define what makes a great partnership between your partner agencies and the mental health board, what would you say?
Relationship building. That is the most important. You got to build those relationships and make it a two-way street, because I think that's what creates transparency. That a lot of times a funding body, there's this power dynamic that we hold the checkbook. If you aren't doing X, Y, and Z to our expectation, then you lose the dollars. And when you do that, then you have providers who don't feel like they can be transparent. You aren't getting the best information out of them. I prioritize building a relationship. That my door's always open. I set up meetings where I don't need to know about the dollars. I don't need to know about the outcome. I want to sit and have a conversation with you of what are the barriers right now out here? Outside of funding, what is something the mental health board can do to support you? We just have to strip back that power dynamic. And that's where you have meaningful conversations, and then you have better informed funding bodies that they know what is the true need. It's not just the black and white application. It's not just the black and white reports that are only giving you a little glimpse, that you miss so much by not having that relationship and that open door to just honest conversations about what's happening out in the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the best intentioned plan, can always go bottoms up.
Yes.
Because as I tell my staff, we are not pouring Starbucks. You know the recipe, but you know the outcome when you're at Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
When you deal with humans,
Yes.
You have to be prepared to, again, go. I always say flexibility and agility, because if you're not able to be flexible to meet the needs of your community, then what is your relevance in the community, right? How do you make yourself part of a solution instead of a fixed support strategy, which is different?
Yeah.
How do you think the board would define its role? Not you so much, but as the full board, because I've met some of the mental health board. There's some fantastic people on the board.
Yes.
So how do you think that they would describe themselves as a partner for resilience?
These are 7 volunteers. They do not get compensated. These are just very passionate people. And to be on the board, you have to live in that community. So this is their community. This is something they are passionate about, that they look at this as these are their neighbors, that they want to come along and build the network, build the right resources, that then their community can be healthy. And they work tirelessly. Mm-hmm. They're incredible. That it is all passion driven for them. That they really do a lot of great work, and that is their role, is really just being that voice for their community and advocating for great resources.
Okay, great. So how do you think you would describe the board's approach to agencies, partners, I should say, who are concerned about weathering cuts to maybe Medicaid or other services that have been the safety net that we've come to depend on?
Right. Yes. I mean, this is the local level. They say townships are the closest form of government to the people, and they are working for their community. And that is no different for a mental health board. We fall very much under that we will always be working for our community. That there is stuff happening at the federal level that just feels out of control. There's stuff at the state level that there's just that trickle-down effect, that it all kind of rolls downhill, and it all feels very uncertain. Mental health board's not going anywhere. They are committed to this community, and there's not a risk of throwing our hands up and saying, we're out, we're cutting this budget, we're packing up, we're out of here. They're in it for the long haul. Mm-hmm. They're not going anywhere. It's going to be a consistent resource for our community, and the more that we see repercussions come down, they are going to be the ones that step in. They are going to be the ones that start figuring out how is that impacting our community now? Mm-hmm. What gaps are we seeing now?
Right.
And we have that ability to quickly adapt. We have the ability at the local level to adjust quickly and say, oh, that's a new need that's popped up. Let's address it. Mm-hmm. That we don't have all of the bureaucratic stuff. We're nonpartisan. There's no room for politics in the mental health board. That there's just so many of those layers that get removed, and it's really just community members working to support community.
And who, because I'm interested, who elects the mental health board?
Mental health board members are all appointed.
Okay.
So at the township level, you have your supervisor and your 4 trustees that form your governing body. All of the mental health board members are appointed by the supervisor with the consent of the board of trustees.
Mm-hmm. And what does it take for people who might be interested in getting involved? Like, what does it take to get involved in a mental health board as a citizen?
There's different ways. All of our meetings are open. We are a public body that is required to have open meetings because we are acting on behalf of the public.
Okay.
So any meetings, they can go to a meeting and there's room for public comment. Come share your story. Come share a gap you're seeing. You're welcome at any of those to have your voice heard. Deeper level, some more established mental health boards might have volunteer opportunities. If you're looking for a volunteer opportunity, trust me, I have plenty of nonprofits who are always looking for volunteers that I can get you connected with one of those. Maybe it's that connection, or to become a board member, you have to be a member of that community, and then they're looking for someone who may have, experience in one of the 3 service areas of mental health, substance use disorders, or developmental disabilities, or lived experience.
Okay.
Can't say enough for lived experience, that people who have navigated these systems and have figured it out can be a very valuable voice on a board.
Yeah. Okay. And if I were concerned at all as a citizen, are there reports that are published for me to pick up if I was interested in seeing how the community was responding using my tax dollars?
Yes, that's what, under the Illinois Community Mental Health Act, that is one of the requirements for a mental health board. They have to publish an annual report, and that's going to include the funding received, the taxes received, and then how that was all used, how that was all spent. And many are going to include a breakdown of, really what service areas, where those dollars went, how many were served. So that all becomes then public record that you can access it online where it's published, or even by going into the office and requesting it.
Oh, nice. One of the things, to go back to the softer side of what we do, one of the things that I'm not sure if Schaumburg initiated it or who initiated it, but the Schaumburg Township Children's Network.
Yes,
right?
That's from the mental health board.
SDs. Yes. So what a cool initiative, right? Can you talk a little bit about the STCN and how it came to light and what the overarching goal is?
It really predates me, so I can't necessarily speak to how the board decided to bring this on, but it's an incredible initiative. It's really this group of providers and the school system. So it's working to create a collaborative relationship between schools and providers for the youth in our community. I think that we see schools can only do so much. They also have to focus on curriculum and learning. And so there's some gaps there that they're seeing. And maybe it's not that Joey needs some assistance and we can handle that at school. Joey has a family that maybe there's some food insecurity happening. Maybe there's some housing instability happening. Maybe there's a mental health need that mom or dad is experiencing, or brother, that is impacting the family unit as a whole. So it's this group was formed to really just have those open conversations and come together, and we have the schools that are able to say, hey, this is an area we're struggling to meet. We have providers that then are troubleshooting that and saying, hey, my agency can maybe fill that gap. Or, hey, if 3 of us come together, that's something maybe we can build out and start putting that support into the community. And then ensuring that just knowing how to do those referrals. How do we get information to the school? That's another big one. There's some resources that would be great for these kids or families, but we don't know how to get it there. If you can communicate that through the school and they can share that, then it's also coming from a trusted resource. It's like just getting that information. So having the information sharing going both ways with providers and the school, and just trying to coordinate that effort around youth and families in our community.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because communication flows so freely and quickly now. So, I mean, I find that interesting. So is there a level of bureaucracy that we need to continue to work on chipping away, perhaps? Because it's interesting, right? Like, it feels like with the information highway, everybody's on it, and some people don't belong there.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, there's a lot of junk information out there. So how do we? I mean, that feels like an access issue. So how do we work on addressing that? Like, that seems like an easy fix. I mean, I'm asking a very loaded question.
Yes. Well, and I think that it really comes from having the right people in the room. I think that is something that we've navigated with the school system is it's trying to find the right person to communicate with, because it might be this person that got put in this meeting, and maybe they're in an administrative role, where then it's like, well, maybe we really need the school social worker who's in those meetings, who really is seeing the need and working on it every day, maybe that's the person that needs to be in the room. It's funny, in these big systems, like a school district, it's like we are spending time chasing communication with one person, and then I might have someone calling from another school saying, we're begging to talk to you. We are begging to like get in the room and have these conversations about our school doing this initiative. So I think that when it comes to youth in the school system, that's part of it, that you end up with administration in each building, you end up with how many number of schools, that then it's finding the right person for those conversations. And I think that also even goes for agencies. That's where it's important to try to build those provider networks, that it's who is the right person for me to call in this agency. I might know of this agency and know they could be a good referral, but who do I call? How do I make that referral productive?
Right.
All about having the right people in the room. And like you said, on the communication highway, we have people that shouldn't be there, and sometimes it's the wrong person ends up in the room.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's just another challenge for us to continue to address,
Yes.
right? So one of the things I think, especially around mental health, is there's this stigma. We know it exists. We know it's big. Again, going back to the information highway, everybody's talking about it. Everybody, and a lot of people think that they are mental health professionals, right?
Yes.
Now that we've started learning about our vagus nerve, and now we're talking about how to calm the vagus nerve in our dogs. I mean, like all of these things, it's all very commonplace.
Yes.
But yet, how do we move from a social media conversation about mental health to real life lived experience mental health, where we're now talking about destigmatizing seeing a professional? How do we work together on that between the mental health board, the communities that support it, and the agencies who are part of it?
That's what I think it really comes down to, just keep talking about it in a productive way. Because I think that is where we say, we just got to talk about it. And like you said, it's like, well, a lot of people are talking about it. But I think that we almost swung the pendulum too far, where now we are so openly talking about it that we've normalized language that I think can also be negative. That we have how many teenagers right now that are, oh, I have anxiety, oh, I have depression. And it's like, you might have a feeling, but I think we also doesn't meet this clinical diagnosis, that we're using these terms that have pretty heavy impact. That it's just like the labeling, that sometimes that can be detrimental, that it's really just, this now gives us a clue of how to treat something. That I think it's almost been, it's almost like popular now to have a mental illness, and we've kind of swung it too far. So I think we do have to work to just get that back to a realistic point where we're having beneficial conversations about it, instead of it just being everyone plasters all of their mental health all over social media, and we start talking about some of the solutions. That I think it's a lot of conversation about, I'm struggling with this problem and this problem and this problem, and we need to kind of swing that to that solution, the strengths-based, that I might have struggled with this, but I went and saw a therapist. I went and gained this tool. I've done this to benefit my mental health. We need to start highlighting those solutions, because keep talking about the problem, the illness, instead of kind of shifting that into, this is what I've done and now I'm better.
Right. So thinking about as potentially episodic and not necessarily as a trait that I now have to
Yes.
live with and excuse some of my less than desirable behavior
Right.
because of this, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think there are people who definitely have lifelong anxiety and depression.
Absolutely.
I am not dismissing that. But to your point, there are definitely times in my life where I develop a level of anxiety that is difficult to cope with. Feeling
Right.
like I have like an elephant on my chest, not being able to get up in the morning, right? Because the day seems so long. So I take your point, which is that we've got an overcorrection, and now we need to sort of hire apparently a ton of people,
Yes.
right? Because we don't have
Yeah.
enough to really talk about whether or not this is something that you will live with, or that you will cope with lifelong, or if this is something that we can handle and allow you to feel better, like for good.
Yes. Yeah, that's what there's great resources. And I think that's what we have to highlight. I think that is how we start addressing some of this stigma. That it's not just talking about mental health, it's talking about it in a meaningful way. That we aren't removing a lot of stigma from mental health if we just kind of highlight the problem and, oh, I have this and this is the problem and I don't feel well. We have to also really highlight recovery and remission and the ways we got to that place of feeling better, of living healthier. I just think that we're missing that piece of it, that's really how you start breaking down stigma, that we also have to start talking about treatment. We have to start talking about what recovery looks like, that's how you do it. It's highlighting the hope aspect of you have to instill hope, because if we just always look at the negative and not feeling well, then that's not doing a lot to address the stigma piece.
Okay. Two final questions related to the Mental Health Board. The first question is can you give the listeners an idea of impact? How many individuals in the township do we collectively serve on an annual basis?
Ooh, I knew I should have pulled this number before I came. When you look at like Schaumburg Township, we have around 140,000 individuals in our community. That's what last year, I want to say it was around 5,000 that were served, and that was in our first year of funding. That I didn't expect to see that in our first year, but there was great impact that ended up coming from those dollars going out into the community. And I only see that number growing as we better understand our community and better understand those needs and gaps and where to put the dollars. Those numbers are going to climb. It's incredibly beneficial. When you look at really the small burden it places on a household on the taxing side, I mean, what a profound impact. If I knew I could give up $30 and know that created access for 5,000 people, take my money. Take it, because it's pretty incredible what can be done on the community level.
Right. Last question. What is one project that you've seen through the Mental Health Board that you're super proud of?
This is where I'm going to plug the bridge.
Oh. I did not tee myself up for this, but
No, through the Schaumburg Township Children's Network, one of the pieces that was identified that we're struggling with is navigating those families that are really struggling and need to tap into multiple resources, because it's usually not just one agency can address the full need on those high demand cases. Through that, there was conversation in these meetings of how can we address this, and your team and you threw your hand up and said the bridge can find a way to address this. And then the coordinated care team was born. And I think this is going to be an incredibly exciting project. It's a pilot, and we're navigating it. Your team's navigating it. But I've already seen they have a great plan in place. The ability to pull multiple providers into one room and say, how do we wrap around this family? Whose team can take what piece of this pie? Because it's too much for one of us to eat. But this family can end up benefiting if each of us take a piece of this and start addressing it. And I think it's going to have incredible impact for those high-need families that have a lot of needs happening at once, that when we can wrap around them with all of the best resources, it's going to be incredibly impactful for those families in our community.
I agree. I'm really excited about finding the story, right? I
Yes.
mean, I've seen this in action before. The historic lands sort of did this way back in the day, where they did wrap services. But when we are all focused on a family, and we can all say, this is my piece, I got this, don't worry about it, and follow that family to a healthy baseline. It's good for the family, it's good for the kids' education, it's good for the community. Because I firmly believe, and this is just my opinion, that we are only as strong as our weakest member.
Absolutely. So
it's our job and responsibility to address the needs of our community members. Well, we thank you for being part of our work and for supporting us and helping us with our dreams to think about ways that we can be more impactful. Give our listeners one final takeaway. What is one thing you want all of our listeners to know about mental health boards?
that they exist. That I feel like mental health boards end up being like the best kept secret. That a lot of people don't know they exist, and they're missing out on those resources. That I just want them to know that and not every community has one, but know that they exist, because then you can be one of the advocates to get a mental health board into your community. I think that is the biggest thing. But just know that they are a resource. If you have someone you're working with, if you don't know where to go, then tap into that. I mean, that's what lean on your mental health board, even outside of funding. Use them as a resource and lean into them for if it's making a connection, if it's something of collaboration that you're trying to create. There's a lot of things that a mental health board can help support outside of funding, but really it's just knowing that they exist and advocating for them.
Well, thank you so much. I think township mental health boards are often invisible until you need them,
Yes.
right? But they're keeping doors open, services running, and hope alive in our neighborhoods. I'm grateful for you for coming on and talking about the Schaumburg Mental Health Board and just opening our eyes to what they are and how they are a quiet force for good and what we can all do to support mental health in our communities. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to highlight mental health boards that, like you said, are often invisible. So this was a great opportunity to make folks aware.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for tuning in to the Mental Health Minute. I'm Kris Salyards, Executive Director for The Bridge. Thank you.